Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking in chapter 4, La famille et la maison, and we're going to be talking about possessive adjectives. First, let's take a look at where we've been in this chapter. In mot 1, we learned to talk about our families. In mot 2, we learned to describe our homes and our neighborhoods. With the verb avoir, we've been able to start talking about what belongs to us, the things we have, sharing our age and finding out other people's age. So now we're going to continue on being able to talk about what we own, the things that belong to us, using possessive adjectives in structure 2. So these are adjectives that are possessive, les adjectifs possessifs. And again, it helps us share what belongs to us and shows ownership. So let's look at the description here. So you use possessive adjectives to show possession or ownership. In French, we remember that our adjectives have to match our nouns. So if, for example, you're using the adjective petit, if you're describing something male, it's pronounced petit, like le garçon est petit, and spelled P-E-T-I-T, versus if that adjective petit is going to describe something feminine, like la fille, it's spelled a little bit different, adds an E at the end, and it's pronounced differently. So, la fille est petite. So, in a similar way, our possessive adjectives are going to change a little bit to agree with a noun that they come before. So, let's take a look at what this looks like in English. So, in English, we have the possessive adjectives my, your, his, her, our, or their. So this is my house, he is your brother, she is our friend. So these words have 3 different forms, and they depend on the number and gender of the thing they're describing. So let's take a look. There's a big table, and we're going to slowly fill it out. So these first things, mon, ma, and mes, those mean my. If you're talking about something, and let me adjust myself here. If you're talking about more than one thing, like my brothers or my sisters, a plural thing that you own, you're going to use mes. But if you're just talking about one thing, one person, a brother or a sister, that's when you need to decide, okay, is this masculine or feminine? If it's masculine, you're going to use mon. And it's feminine, you're going to use ma, which is really easy to remember because it's like the word la. So again, we have these 3 words that mean my brother, mon frère, my sister, ma sœur, and mes frères or mes sœurs, my brothers or my sisters. And so you're just looking, you've got 2 decisions to make. The first question you ask yourself when you're deciding which form to use, is this talking about one thing or more than one thing? If it's talking about more than one thing, you just gotta pick mes. And if you're only talking about one thing you own, like my dog or my house, in French you're going to decide, okay, is that thing that I own masculine or feminine? So let's continue on looking at some of our other possessive adjectives. Our next set, these mean your, like they belong to one person. You'll notice these start with T. It's like the pronoun tu. So if I said tu as un frère, you have a brother, that person would be ton frère. And you can see that these are going to be really easy to memorize because they are really similar, almost identical to the words that mean my, but they use a T at the beginning, ton, ta, and te, instead of an M for mon, ma, and mes. And we're going to see that pattern followed a little bit more closely here. When you are talking about something that belongs to a person, like the pronoun il or elle, in English we have his or her, that's when you're going to use son, sa, and se. So if it's his brother, it's son frère. If it's her brother, it's son frère, because the noun that you're modifying is brother right here. So son frère, if it's his or her sister, it's sa sœur. And if it's his or her brothers or sisters, it would be ses frères or ses sœurs. Then things actually start to get a little bit easier. you'll notice when you get into those plural pronouns like nous, vous, and il, elle plural, the word for here, it would be our, like our brother, our sister, our brothers or sisters. You only have one choice to make if it's singular or plural. If the thing that you're talking about that you own as a group, our thing, is one thing, like one brother or one sister, you're going to use the word notre. If you're talking about multiple people or multiple things that you own as a group, our dogs, our houses, you're going to use nos, N-O-S. And you can see that these are plural because they have the S at the end, so that's really helpful. And this pattern that we see with notre and nos, just having those two forms, we're going to see with the your, that vous form, and with the il and elle form there. So again, we have votre. This one's easy to remember because it's like notre, but it starts with a V, like nous starts with nous, an N, and vous starts with a V. So votre frère or votre sœur. This is somebody that belongs to more than one people. So I'm saying, okay, Sally and Bob, this is your sister, votre sœur, because she belongs to both of them. And finally, we have the same thing with il and elle plural, and this word is a little bit different than the rest of them, but it's not too terrible. So this word is leur. So this means their, like it belongs to a group of people that you're talking about. So if I'm saying, oh, do you know Bob and Sally? Their sister's name is Trisha. I would say it belongs to more than one person that I'm talking about, but I'm not talking to. That's where I would have il or elle plural for my pronoun. That's where I'm going to use leur. So leur frère, their brother, leur sœur, their sister, or leur frère, their brothers, or leur sœur, their sisters. And so you notice that you really don't hear a difference between the singular leur frère and the plural leur frère. So we're going to talk a little bit later in this chapter about how to differentiate between that singular leur frère and that plural leur frère. So we're going to look at some examples of how we could use these in a sentence. So we had talked about describing people, so I'm going to use some examples here. So to say your friend is tall, you'd say ton ami est sympa, ta tante est sympa, ton ami est grand, tes grands-parents ont un chien. So this is a way of describing somebody without a pronoun. It's your friend, your aunt, your grandparents. And so now we're going to go to an interactive slide where I want you to think about the people in your life and qui sont tes parents? So this is our question word, qui, who. So you need to list some names here. Your sentence could say, mes parents sont, and then list their names. Your sentence could start, mon père est, and list his name. Ma mère est, and list her name. So I want you to use at least one of those sentence starters on your interactive Pear Deck. Go ahead and pause this so that you can get a good sentence written. Don't forget to have good sentence structure. So now that you've described who your parents are, there is another question. Comment sont tes parents? So our question word here is comment. So I'm asking what they're like. You're going to describe them. So again, you can use those same sentence starters here, but instead of listing their names, you're going to tell me what they're like. So for example, I might say, oh, mes parents sont très gentils. They're very nice. Mon père est très grand. He's very tall. Ma mère est blonde. She's blonde. So go ahead and pause this and use at least one of these sentence starters to write a beautiful full sentence describing comment sont tes parents. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how we decide how to match this. And I had mentioned that you are matching it to, you're matching your possessive adjective to the item that is owned, not the owner. So we've got a really good example down here We're saying it is Paul's dog. It is Marie's dog. And in English, we would say it's his dog for Paul and her dog for Marie. But in French, your possessive adjective isn't determined by the owner. It's determined by the thing they own. So what's really helpful here is this is where we can use our articles to decide which possessive adjective to use. So we see chien, dog is masculine, which we've talked about. So for Paul, I could say le chien de Paul, it is Paul's dog. Or I can shorten that using my possessive adjective saying c'est son chien, it's his dog. And the same thing goes for Marie. And even though the owner, Marie, is feminine, the thing she owns, the dog, is masculine. And that is why we are going to use son here. So we can even think of these possessive pronouns as a way to replace an article to still show, okay, is this object masculine? Is it feminine? Is it plural? Deciding whether here, to talk about his or her, we're going to use son, sa, or say. There is one more note here that when you use mon, ton, or son before feminine singular nouns that begin with a vowel or a silent H, well, you have to use those masculine son or mon. And the reason is for pronunciation. We know that when we pronounce French, we want it smooth like butter. We've talked about that a ton this year. So if I were to use the feminine sa or ma or ta, it would give that hiccuping sound. So even though this is feminine, and you're saying, okay, the thing I own, that friend, is feminine because it ends with an E, I could use sa. It would sound like this would say sa ami. You get that little hiccuping sound that we don't like. So here's where you're going to want to use son ami. The same thing goes for mon ami. And any other noun that begins with a vowel or a silent H, you're always going to use that masculine mon, ton, or son. So I know we've talked about how the French loves exceptions, and here's one of them. And so that liaison is talking about how that N sound moves over. So we've got a nice smooth son ami, mon ami. We're also going to see this with any other word that begins with a vowel. Mon oncle, ton ami, son école, nos amis, vos amis, leurs amis. So when you have that thing that's owned, start with a vowel. You're going to make sure that that last sound in your possessive adjective glides over into the next word for some really smooth pronunciation. So instead of mon oncle, it's mon oncle. Instead of ton ami or ton ami, it's ton ami. So that's where that last consonant actually gets to shine in French, which it normally doesn't. So that was a little bit about possessive adjectives. So now we are going to move on to our guided notes in our next video.